Hey everyone, my name is Sarah, and welcome to the first ever episode of the Fully Seen, Fully Known, Fully Loved podcast, where I will be talking about everything related to the love of the Father. In this first episode, I want to talk about my experiences of a father and a little bit of my testimony. Okay, so grab a hot beverage and get comfy, because here we go. I would say I grew up without the best experience of a father, but I love my father, and now I see him in a different way than I saw him a few years ago. Now I see him through the eyes of the Heavenly Father. I've recently seen footage of myself as a baby at Christmas, sitting on his lap, happy and giggling, which has brought me some healing and a glimpse of the good times I couldn't really fully grasp. This old Christmas video also helped me look at myself in a different way, because I think when we only have a picture of the past, we can disassociate or disconnect from the fact that we are the person in the photo until it comes to life. For me, I was brought up in a home where children were seen and not heard, where the only emotion allowed was anger, and it was only allowed by the rule maker of the house. When you were asked a question or spoken to, you had to answer as quickly as you could and with as few words as possible. You were usually too afraid to ask for things because you never knew if you were going to get a harsh reply. There were many intense moments of anger, verbal threats, things thrown at a wall, even fists through them. I remember family members crawling up the stairs, weeping, wondering when all of this was going to end. Much of this continued until I was old enough to be independent, and some of it still continues today. But in all honesty, this is just a brief description to preserve some dignity for the person behind the story. But the wounds ran deep. Maybe you can relate to my story, or maybe it was worse for you. Maybe you didn't have a father present in your life, and maybe you were lucky enough to have a loving example of a father. Maybe not. It took me most of my life, up to maybe the last year or two, to see that instead of focusing on how terrible this person acted, I could see him as a broken and hurt child of God. While studying various psychology courses in university, I've learned that we inherit patterns and beliefs from our parents, and those patterns ripple through generation until someone chooses to break them. When I truly began to understand how the love of an earthly father is so crucial to understanding the love of the Father in heaven, it made me see why I felt terrified and couldn't let the love of the Father penetrate from my mind into my heart. The truth is that we learn behaviors and beliefs from our parents that shape us and influence the adults, fathers, and mothers that we become. If you're like me and you've never had an example of love that resembled the Heavenly Father, it's very difficult to come close to becoming a good example to your children, and the pattern can continue for generations until it's broken. I really like this saying, and I'm sure you've heard it before. You can't pour from an empty cup, and that is especially true of love. My father, he had a neglectful father, and possibly his father did as well. These kind of father-son relationships create generational wounds. These types of wounds can lead to what is called an orphan spirit or mindset. It's a mindset that believes no one really sees me and no one really truly loves me. This mindset often leads to angry outbursts as perceived rejection to protect from hurt, to isolation so no one can harm them, to people-pleasing in an attempt to fit in. It can also lead to hoarding resources, self-protective behaviors, and strong independence, which often says, I can do this by myself because I've always done it by myself. And because of lack of self-esteem that often goes hand in hand, it often puts people in situations where they get used and abused, which just reinforces the beliefs they already hold about themselves. They also often become very controlling with their spouses and children, believing if I can control them and keep them close, they won't abandon me, which is just another root of rejection. When I began to truly examine my experiences, I could see the same behaviors in myself. behaviors meant to protect me from pain and rejection that I perceived as a child. They played out in seeking behaviors such as promiscuous sex, moving from relationship to relationship, an eating disorder to change myself into someone I thought I would be accepted. I numbed my pain with drugs because I was taught to hate myself and believed I wasn't loved by my Father on earth or my Father in heaven. I would say I have recently become a Christian, giving my life to Jesus again about 6 years ago now. I grew up in the church, but I never really understood what it meant to follow Jesus until 2020. In 2020, God set me free from a 15-year battle with bulimia. I don't really need to go into all the details, but what truly set me off was a single comment about my appearance that came from my father, and it shattered me to the core. This perceived rejection from my father grew into perceived rejection from my peers at school, teen magazines, media, and so forth. The enemy just took one statement and ran with it, which eventually led me to a 15-year battle in and out of treatment centers. At one point, I eventually felt like giving up because when I wanted to get better, I was hooked on this way of handling my emotions, holding on to it because I never felt safe expressing them. I also progressively began to try to fill that empty space I didn't know existed with relationships that failed one after another. Like I said earlier, an orphan mindset goes along with negative self-image that attracts individuals with similar wounds and their own addictions. It's just a mess of hurt. Eventually, I began numbing with marijuana, smoking, alcohol, you name it, because binging no longer cut it. I needed to escape, even briefly, from the hatred I felt towards myself and others, until God set me free. And how He set me free is the key to being set free from all addictions, I believe. The truth that you are seen, known, and loved. During the lockdowns in early 2020, when most churches were closed and online church started to emerge, prophetic ministries became more popular. I saw my mother watching one on a Facebook Live, and I saw how God was speaking through these individuals, some prophets, some with a prophetic gifting, and I was amazed that God knew all of this. I knew that God knew everything, but at that moment, it really clicked. I began watching these live streams on my laptop in my room, on and off for about a month, while I was still actively engaging in my eating disorder and marijuana at the time. For a while, I wanted to stop because those habits controlled every waking moment of my life. One day, I decided I wanted to stop smoking marijuana. I even threw out the paraphernalia that morning. And that evening, I got into a prophetic online live stream, and a man said he saw someone using marijuana who wanted to stop and even had planned to throw it away. As he began to pray about breaking the addiction, then he said, "Some of you struggle with how you see yourself and your body." But he saw Jesus come from behind and hug you. Jesus was pure light, and as that light shone through you, it revealed all the lies you had believed about yourself. And in that moment, God healed me physically from digestive complications and took away all the desire to ever binge and purge again. I woke up the next morning a new person, healed. Looking back, people could say I simply chose to stop. But I know it was more than that. I know God was showing me that even after all the years of asking Him to make me normal, He loved me then and there, and that He saw me and knew everything about me. That powerful truth set me free from bulimia that day. And I won't pretend that everything was perfect from there on, because it took me a while to understand that revelation. I had ups and downs with addictions for a while, even leading up to this past year. But the more He showed me He was there, even in the smallest desires of my heart, the more I began to trust Him and let Him into the broken places of my heart. I began to see my earthly father in a different way, as a broken boy with father wounds of his own, who did his best with what he was given in life. When I truly began to forgive my father for the hurts I experienced, and even forgive God for what I thought was Him taking the only fatherly figure in my life, my grandpa, through cancer, though I know now God didn't give him cancer, I became open to the possibility that God the Father was not my earthly father. They cannot be compared in their ways of love because the Heavenly Father's love is unconditional and perfect. I slowly began to give up perfectionism, though it's something I'm still working on, because we can only be perfected in the sacrifice of Jesus on the cross, hidden in Jesus and in the Father. I also slowly began to realize that rejection doesn't matter because God will never reject us, that I was not alone because He never leaves or forsakes us, and so many more truths, that I'm His child, that He calls me by name, that I'm fearfully and wonderfully made, that He hears my cries, and that He has forgiven me for all my sins through His Son Jesus' sacrifice, and that I'm a royal priesthood, meaning that I am the daughter of the King and can come to Him whenever, and that my emotions matter to Him because He gave them to us, and that my voice matters because He put me on this earth, and He put the breath in my lungs to speak truth for such a time as this. One of the most pivotal moments, I think, was when I had the Father speak truth and a blessing over me. I went to a couple week-long leaders training course and at a local church. And at the end of this course, after prophetic training and practice, they had a prophet who taught the course speak over us if they felt led. I recorded it, but it wasn't till about 3 years later, after receiving that word, that I was truly able to accept it, because I had begun to break down the walls I had built up to keep God out. The message was simple, but I believe it's true for every one of His daughters. You are not a mistake. You are a good person. Whatever has been spoken over you is a lie. You are a good daughter. You are a good daughter. You are a good person. You are a good daughter no matter what was spoken over you. You are a good daughter. Looking back at the message, it was so simple, but I think God really just wanted to make sure that I heard what He was saying, and that's why He repeated it so many times. The moment that message went from my brain to my heart, it was game over for the enemy. It was like something clicked and filled in a space of my heart that I had never experienced before. Love really does bind all wounds. God is love, and He loves you, precious son or daughter. Even since that moment, God has continued to work on me, helping me find my voice, embrace my emotions, walk through a painful breakup, and practice forgiveness, which I want to share in separate podcasts. But I wanted to tell you to this today, to give you hope. God sees you, knows you, and loves you. He's waiting for you to come to Him. He wants to have an intimate relationship with you, despite whatever hurt you may have experienced. He wants to bind up the wounds of your past. Will you let Him? Well, anyways, that's the end of my very first podcast, and I want to say thank you for joining me, and I hope you guys will continue to listen and be blessed by future messages. God bless.